Hello, welcome here straight out of the woods. So I'm back in the woods. I'm walking here and just relaxing. So I love it to be in the nature. And this is a good time to think about several things. And on the way here to this place, I remembered a question that quite often came up in my talks, if I'm talking about cybersecurity, security, DevSecOps, whatever. And I'm using this term CVSS, and then people are asking, what exactly is CVSS? Who's creating this? Who's defining this? What are the components of CVSS? And what does it mean for me? So how to work with this number that I'm getting here. And I will explain you exactly this one. So what's CVSS, what components are in the CVSS, and what does it mean for you? So if you're interested in this, stay tuned. Okay, I found a place where I can sit down to and relax a little bit. So I really love this trees and this stuff that's here on the ground. It's very, very soft and it's a forest. I just love it. But we were at the topic CVSS. So what CVSS is, it's a system to give you a metric about the importance or about the strengths of a vulnerability. So you will have this value is something between 0 and 10, and then what does it mean? So it means that based on different internal components, we will cover all of them in a few minutes, all of them, you will calculate a number, and this number is more or less an expression of how dangerous this vulnerability is. Right now, during the time I'm recording this year, it's beginning of 2021. It's the actual version of the CVSS system is 3.1. They are discussing already the version 4, and as you mentioned, or if you can imagine, we have version 1 and 2 and 3 and some subversions. So if you see some CVSS score, it's always important to see which version it is. So and sometimes in some systems you will see that you will get 2 CVSS values, and then for example CVSS version 2, it has 3, the value is 3, and with the CVSS version 3.1 it will have the value 5 or whatever. So it's important to know not only the value, it's important to know which version of CVSS version is used to calculate this one. What exactly CVSS means now, the short version. So the long version is a common vulnerability scoring system, and the target is here to have a normalized description of different vulnerabilities so that you can start comparing them in a hopefully objective way. So we will see that it depends who is calculating these values, and it's a little bit influenced the value itself, but in general you want to have this normalized way to describe something. And it's what we will have is we are describing the risk is more or less the possibility that something will happen multiplied by the damage it could have or create. And this is more or less what we want to describe. So the balance between how likely it is that it's happening and what is a worst case or some other scenarios in the back or then later. So this is CVSS. Now it's time for a short coffee. I will cook now a coffee, and then we will explore a little bit the area. And the next thing is what are the components you need to calculate the CVSS value. Okay, perfect. Okay, next we want to have a look at the values itself. So the CVS values are between 0 and 10, and then you have groups. So CVS value from A to B is then assigned to a group, and the groups are none, low, medium, high and critical. So check out what exactly the CVSS value is for every group. So I haven't checked if this range is for all versions of CVSS is the same, but if there is any difference, it isn't a big difference. But for you as a consumer of this value, it makes sense that you will start with this group. So focus first on the critical one, then on the high one, or someone is constantly working on medium-sized one. So this is something you should have as a practical advice. So start with this group before you're really going in detail what these values are. But if you're looking at these values, you will see that this value is calculated out of 3 components. One component is basic metrics, the second one is a temporal metric, and the last one is a environmental metric. And these 3 metrics are then merged with factors. The value of these factors are not based on some statistical experience or some mathematical background, and this is one of the weak points I will cover later in this here. What are the weak points, but this just as a heads up. So these factors and why the balance between this base metrics is as it is one of the things you should have an eye on. So if you have this value, for example, inside X-ray, check first if it is a CVSS2, CVSS3, then check the values for each base component so that you have a bit more feeling if it is so strong because there is this environmental one so big, or the basic score so high, or whatever. So this is mostly a good start to work with this matrix. And as next, we want to see what are the basic metrics. Okay, the basic values or the basic metrics. This basic metric, what's calculated by different parties or can be calculated by different parties, is the description of this vulnerability. So what is the damage of this one based on technical facts, without temporal effects, without environmental effects. So it means we are really just focusing on the technical description, and the target here is to have at this point the worst case. So the basic score must be the worst case of this damage that you're expecting. There's one weak point at this basic description or this basic calculation, is that different persons or different parties can do this initial calculation, and this can be the guy who found it, this can be the company that is affected because their product could be an independent group. And yeah, well, all these groups will have different targets, and this is a weak point. Okay, I spoke about this different group that can calculate this basic score, and we have more or less 3 parties here that you should have an eye on. So assume that you're a security researcher and you're earning your money with these vulnerabilities because you're selling these vulnerabilities or this information to vulnerability databases or to the vendors or whatever. Then the initial base score is this basic damage or this worst case scenario. From your point of view, it's good if this is a really high value, because you want to have a dramatic value, you want to have a high price for this information. So your personal behavior is that you're rating it high because you want to earn money with this, you want to have better reputation, and so on and so on. On the other side, a company will have exactly the other behavior. So companies say they want to de-escalate, they want to have lower basic value. So for them it's better to say, yeah, there's a security risk, but it's not so important, not so critical as the other way. So yeah, completely catastrophic base score. So companies want to rate it lower. And then you have this independent group, so this third parties that try to calculate this basic score. Now you have different things. So the guy who found it, who is aware of all the mechanics and what's happening, the company knows the product and all this stuff and can maybe better rate what is really the damage that's possible. The independent group is more a generic abstract way of calculating things and maybe not aware of all these tiny details. In general, we don't have this recommendation, so it must be validated by a unique group or an independent group. So it's good for you if you know that you have these three parties. It's good if you have the information, this vulnerability is found and the base score is calculated by the researcher that found this one or by the company that's affected or whatever, so that you can see how you want to interpret it, this value. So if there's a value of 5, do you think it's more a 6 or it's more a 7? Because you know who is the initial calculator of this base score. Okay, one of the components of this basic score is the technical stuff you need to have success with this attack. So it means, do you need, for example, the knowledge of an existing user that you can use and log in? Do you have the need that someone is involved in this attack? So during the time you're doing something, that someone else, administrator or whatever, must be convinced to do something. Can you attack the system just over the internet, or do you need physical access to this one? So these are all these components that are part of this base score if you are talking about the technical requirements for a successful attack. Another module of this base score is the complexity of this attack. So do you need some things that must be done in a specific order with interaction of someone, or can you just do it by yourself? Do you have some steps that must be done in a certain amount of time, or all these things? So the complexity of this attack itself is one value, and then it includes all these interactions, these fine-grained steps you have to do, and specific knowledge you need, and interactional things, all this. And this is measured in this part that will describe the complexity of this attack. Okay, the third thing that is part of this basic score is that you want to calculate the possible damage, and the damage can be you are able to set the system offline, so make it unusable. It could be that you are able to extract data. It could be that you are modifying data so that nobody knows that it is modified. So in here we have the first thing that, or one thing that is not really clear. So for some environments it's really bad if, for example, the data is stolen or it's extracted. In some other environments it's maybe way worse if you're just modifying data and nobody knows it. And in some environments even the knowledge that there is this information is be a disaster. So whatever it is, you should have an eye on the calculation of this base score for this dedicated vulnerability if you want to classify if this value for the damage of this vulnerability fits to your needs. So you're normally focusing on three parts. One is a confidentiality. I can't spell this word. The integrity and the availability of this system. So that's it. So have an eye on how this is calculated. Make sure that it fits to your needs, or that you can calibrate this value, what it means for you. Okay, and since CVSS version 3.0, we have an additional metric, and this is called the scope metric. The scope metric is to highlight or to describe if you can change your scope in a way like you're attacking a virtual machine. You have so many rights, or you can compromise this virtual machine in a way that you can switch from this virtual machine into the scope of the host machine, the underlying machine that is managing the virtual machine. And to have a value for this one, they introduce the scope metric. So if you have a compromise component, if you can affect the components left or right, and how to compromise and what is possible, so how easy it is to have this scope switch. Yeah, that's important. So if you have this base score and you can see how it's calculated, have a look at the scope metric, because then you can decide if this is for your dedicated environment something that's important, yes or no. Okay, with all these metrics, especially the scope metric, we can imagine that at some point we have these elements that are rated or that are part of the base score, but at some points we don't have it. So it means maybe this is not important for you. So for example, the scope metric, if it describes that there is if you're running this one in a virtual machine, then it's a tag vector to the host system. So maybe you're not running this in a virtual machine, so this makes no sense for you, or it's not a value that is important for you. So, and for this, to adjust this base score, we have two other possibilities. One is a temporal metrics and one is an environmental metrics. Okay, the next base group with this metrics are the temporal metrics. So we had the basic metrics, now we are talking about the temporal metrics, and then we have the environmental metrics. So what are the temporal metrics and what is the basic behavior of this one? It's very important to note that this temporal metrics can just decrease the value of a base score. It never can increase the basic value. And why? So the theoretical background or the argumentation here at this point is that the basic score, the base score, should describe the worst case, the absolute worst case, with no possibility to have it more critical or whatever. So and if you have the worst case already in your description, you have the value for the worst case, then every change should just decrease, or not changing or decreasing this value. That's the basic idea behind this one. And now the question is, what is a temporal metric? A temporal metric is everything that will happen over the time, and it could be, for example, if you have the theoretical aspect of an attack vector and then sometime later someone is able to do this in real life, then this is a temporal change and you will get a change in this temporal metric. The other thing could be that there is a reported vulnerability, and the product owner, the company or the group project, whatever, is confirming the security issue, then you have a change in your temporal metrics. Or if you have a patch available, the challenge with patches is that you have different things you should look at. So if there is a patch available, then all systems that are not patched, they are in a higher risk, maybe. On the other side, if you have this patch, the security researcher or the attack, the persons that want to attack the system will have more information based on this patch and can maybe give a variation of this attack, or can just be more efficient with this attack. So a patch, if this is available, it's not always a good thing. Sometimes it's it's a way more critical because you're distributing more detailed information about this vulnerability. So what exactly will happen in the field is really up to the time. So the temporal metric will change over the time the basic score. Have in mind the basic score will just decrease and never increase by the temporal component. Okay, we saw the basic metrics, we saw the temporal metrics, and we saw the behavior of this temporal metrics, that the worst case that is inside this base metric can just decrease. So now with the environmental metrics, we have the possibility to scale all these different factors for our own needs. It means if there is something in the base score that is highly valued or has a high value, and this technical component is just not existing in our environment, then we can correct it inside our environmental metrics. So it means you have to look at the possibilities how to describe your environment inside this environmental metrics, and with this you can rebalance for your own needs. And yeah, this is, for example, with this patch, if you have a system with vulnerability, the patch is already available, but you are not able to patch it by yourself because you need a third party, an external consulting company or whatever, or then this is a higher risk because there is something existing, it is not activated in your system. So you can decide if this is a higher risk for you, yes, no, and so on and so on. So the environmental metrics will give you the possibility to reflect your needs and your environment to this basic scoring, and this will be finally the input for the final score. Okay, after we created all these three base values, or the base value, temporal, base metric, temporal metric, and environmental metric, we can start calculating the final score. The final score will now balance all the three different values to one single value, and it will be something between 0 and 10. And here are a few things I really would like to mention is, first of all, if you're working with this environmental metrics, make sure that everybody in your team or everybody in your company will have more or less the same behavior of rebalancing these values. So this is one thing. The second thing is, don't try to scale too dramatically with your environmental metrics. This will just then override all this fine-tuning that's done before, and then you don't have comparable values anymore. The third thing is a lot of people taking this base value and maybe some temporal components from external, but they are not working with this environmental metrics, and this can be difficult or dangerous because this environmental metrics is a very important thing, so that this value will fit as best as possible to your needs or to your environment. The next thing is that quite often people just taking this base value, and this is the same for them as risk, and this is not really the true, because you have to understand, or you have to look a little bit more inside this value itself. So how this is calculated, or what are the main components there, and then make sure that you are not just following this fixed value, and try to rebalance for your own needs. So now you have the final score. Now you can, this final score is immediately in one of those groups, so none, low, medium, high, and critical, based on the value that's there. And with this value and with this group, you can start comparing or feeding other systems, or start deciding what is the next action based on this value. Okay, it's time for the conclusion. So what we saw today, we saw that CVSS is a common vulnerability scoring system, and this is a way to describe in an abstract way the value of a security incident. So it's the how powerful or how big is the damage of this security issue that is found. We saw that you have a value between 0 and 10, and we have these groups from low, none, low, medium, high, and critical. And this is the first step you should start working with, so that you start working with these groups, and then later try to analyze how this score is calculated. We have three base groups or base factors that are building the final score. The first one is basic metrics. The basic metrics are the pure technical description and the description of the worst case of this security issue here. And the second one is the temporal metrics. The temporal metrics is always decreasing the base score. It's never increasing the base score, and it's the reaction of there is now a patch from the theoretical attack description. We have now verified attack or a verified security or vulnerability or security issue in a product, and so on and so on. So this is affecting via the temporal score. And the last part is the environmental metrics, and this environmental metrics is more or less a transformation from this abstract description to your environment where you want to use this metric. So if there is a vulnerability, how dangerous it is in your system, how big is the damage, and so on and so on. So it makes sense to have a look at this calculation of the basic score if you want to learn a little bit more about this one, how the different factors are affecting the final score and so on. There are online CVSS calculator available, and I will put the links somewhere here maybe, and then you can play around to get a feeling, because in the beginning this is a very abstract thing and you need to understand a little bit the mechanics here at this point. Have in mind that it's the basic score is high or low based on who is finding or who is calculating first this basic score. The security researcher that want to sell this information with a high price is interested in a high score, and the company that is affected, or the product from a company that's affected, that is just want to have a low basic score, and maybe some independent group is doing something in the middle. All together, it's a metric that's used since a long time. There is no other metric that's so widely adopted, and a lot of tools are able to deal with these numbers and these groups from the CVSS score. Have in mind that this CVSS score has a version, so if you get a CVSS final score, make sure that you get the information if it is version 2 or 3 or 3.1, and have an eye on the description of this group, because they are working on the version 4. Altogether, will give you now the possibility to deal with this abstract value, to learn how this is transformed inside your environment, or what is the effect or the meaning for you inside your environments. That is more or less everything to the CVSS score. You will need time to understand, and a lot of tools like X-ray, for example, they will give you not only one CVSS score. So X-ray will give you, for example, always the CVSS score version 2 and 3.1, so that you can decide your consuming systems what is the right value for this one. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this one, and if you want to have more information about different things like CVSS or different topics, just let me know. I'm more than happy to have more ideas. I will work on this topic for the next few weeks and months anyway, so just let me know via Twitter, LinkedIn, email, or as a comment, whatever, what you're interested in, what should I cover, anything I should explain in detail. So this would be really nice to know. I'm personally done. I'm now here in the forest. It looks like 2.5 hours I will have sun before the sun is down, and I will search now for a place, because I will sleep now in the forest and have a relaxing night here. And so whatever time you're looking at this one, so on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, weekend, whatever, have a nice day, enjoy the rest of the day, stay safe, and let me know what you want, what you think about this one, and stay safe. And now I will pack my camera.